All right, today I've got for you a data overview presentation for the Gordon County School Board. My name is Adam Long. I teach at Sonoraville High School and I teach economics. All right, the purpose of today's presentation is to analyze student achievement data on the Georgia Milestones EOC in economics and identify areas of strengths and weaknesses in order to improve student achievement. To determine the causes of low performance students, we're going to look at three things. We're going to look at demographics within our school for teachers and students. We're going to look at attendance and discipline, and we're going to look at literacy and Lexile data. The teacher demographic at Sonoraville is pretty interesting. There's 72 full-time teachers, 31% male, 41% are female. Roughly, when you look down at the bottom of the graph, the years of experience, roughly 14%, maybe a little over 14%, are 0 to 7 years of experience. Slightly over 16% have 8 to 15 years of experience. The largest group is our 16 to 22 years of experience, and they're getting roughly 27 to 28 percent of the full-time teachers at Sonoraville, and then finally we get the 22 through 30 plus years of experience, and they make up roughly 13 to 14% of the teacher demographics. When you look at the student demographic profile, each of the last 4 years we've had between 1,000 and 1,200 students, with an average of about 1,100 students, maybe slightly below 1,100. And what you see through the first 3 years is a slow uptick in student population and then a decline in 2018, 2019, which we would prefer to keep this number lower so that we're having lower class sizes and our variables are not changing dramatically. Something that you see that's interesting with our student population over the last 4 years is the percentage of each race or ethnicity is staying approximately the same each year. So as there's changes in student population, for the most part, there's not a drastic change in the percentage of white students, African American students, Asian students, Hispanic students, so on and so forth. So our trends are pretty predictable. We're not seeing wide variances there. When it comes to socioeconomic data, we're seeing a decline overall. We went from 52 down to 50%, and then in 17-18 we dropped down, a pretty sharp decrease down to 46%, and then back up to 48% in 18 to 19. We'd like to be able to continue to decrease this data, obviously, and be able to just help our community continue to grow. When you look at the English language learners, just like with the student demographic, we're seeing very predictable trends. In 15-16, there was an uptick to 16-17 of English language learners. We went from 1% to 2%, and then each of the last 3 years, 16-17, 17-18, and 18-19, there's been very steady and constant numbers of English language learners as they relate to our school population. Looking at attendance, this is easily the most troubling data point, or one of the most troubling data points in my presentation. In 2015, 2016, we had 92% attendance. So it was, very high attendance. And then we had a decrease in 16, 17 down to 90%. Moving on to the next year, the next school year, 17 to 18, we dropped 6 percentage points down to 84% attendance, and then we had a slight rebound, slight increase in attendance getting into 18, 19. This is something that we're going to have to pay a lot of attention to moving forward, and we really want to make this trend move in the opposite direction. We've got to take some steps as a district, as a school, to ensure that we're maximizing seat time and maximizing instruction time and improving and increasing attendance within our schools. Discipline has been relatively consistent throughout each of the last 4 years. When you look at 16, we had a 5% suspension rate. In 2017, we nearly cut that in half, down to 3%. 18 was still 3%. And then 19, we had a slight uptick, but we're seeing constant data that is giving us a positive trend. We definitely don't want to move up to 5% in the next school year, but the hope is that we can continue to move in a constant and slow digression in suspension rates. Looking at the student achievement data, as we saw with the majority of the student population, there's some variance in each school year. In 15-16, we had 272 students tested, with about 6% of our population being distinguished. Roughly 39 to 40% were proficient learners. And then you shift to the next year, we had a lower number of students tested at 157, and the number of distinguished and proficient students or test subjects, if you will, decreased, pretty dramatically. We went down from nearly 40% down to right at 25%, and then down to about 2.5% distinguished. And this is a very troubling trend. We had an increase in developing learners, as you'd expect, and then obviously an increase in the number of beginning learners. Moving on to 17-18, our numbers of distinguished stayed relatively constant. The number of proficient learners increased back up to about 30%, but not back where it was. And the number of developing learners and beginning learners slightly decreased again, but still those numbers are higher than what we would aim for. Looking at 18-19, we had another decline in proficient and distinguished. It wasn't a large decline, but it was a decline. And then there was a slight decline in the developing and beginning learners from the previous year. In what we really want to see is we want to see this graph tracking in the opposite direction. We want to see an increase, even if it's only slight. We want to see increases in distinguished learners and proficient learners with decreases in developing and beginning learners. And so we'll move forward and continue to track this, but the direction that things are moving in the over the last 4 years is definitely not the direction that we want to go. Another way to look at it, if you look at 15-16, we were just short of the state average on the milestone for economics, and we were a good bit above the district average at Sonoraville. Then you move the next year, and we had a sharp drop off in the proficient or above status, with 21% being proficient or above, and that fell well short of the district by a little over 8 points, or actually right at 8 points, and we were not even close to the state average. Moving on to 17-18, we had rebounded and got closer to the state average, beat the district, but only by 2.5 points. And then 18-19, we actually decreased in the number of proficient or above, but only slightly, and about the same gap to the state scores, and beat the state average or the district average by just a little bit more. And the trend is not moving in the right direction like we had talked about. So we really want this to be a reverse trend where we're moving up. But we've got to get constant before we can move our data in a positive direction. All right, so looking at Lakeside scores, where students are on or above the grade level, So Norval High School outscored the state from 64.3% to 61.5%, and also outscored the district. In 16-17, the state and the district both eclipsed Norval. In 17-18, the district dropped, as did Norval High School, and we fell pretty adequately behind the state average. And finally, in 2018-2019, we were still down 61.3% below the district by 7 percentage points, and a little over 9 percentage points from the state average. And again, these are trends where we are just decreasing, overall as a whole, and kind of moving in the wrong direction. We're not far off of the 15-16 year, but we would definitely like to be trending more to the positive, and beating and eclipsing the state average and the district average. Strengths and weaknesses. In summary, Norval is performing well on EOC milestones compared to other high schools in the district. However, we're behind the state in our scores. Norval also needs to focus on improving attendance percentages in order to allow students more instructional time in class, and Lexile scores need to be improved. Key areas of improvement: if we can reduce the number of students absent in order to maximize classroom instruction time, that's absolutely going to be a benefit to us. We can improve Lexile levels to ensure comprehension on the EOC milestone, and we really need to place a great emphasis on improving economics achievement. Not only is economics an important subject in school, it's got important and necessary information and content that our students are going to need to know once they leave here. Suggested action steps: we need to formulate a plan to reduce the number of students who are absent. We need to educate teachers on Lexile levels and how to go about improving these for our students. We need to provide professional development for economics teachers on ways to utilize Newsela. Review and analyze economics content standards, and build knowledge of domain structures and content weights on the economics EOC, and allow our teachers and students to better prepare for the things that will be entailed in the milestone. The questions that we have: so what are your observations of the data? What resources can we use to assist students in need? What can we do to address attendance problems? How can we support teachers to help improve student achievement? And this is the presentation. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope that you've been able to learn and gather a lot of information on our district, on the state, and on Norval, and where we stand and what we can do to improve. Thank you for your time.